everybody. So this is episode 7, part 9 on YouTube, and I think it's like part 42 on TikTok. So for all the new people who have started following me, I wanted to thank you. And I also wanted to explain a little bit as to why I'm doing these videos. So the reason I am delving deeply into our history is so that we, those who have been born and raised outside of the island, can get a better understanding of our history, our culture, and who we are as a people. So this episode is going to be about Higuanamota. She was the only daughter that we have documented of Anacaona. We do not know who her father was. A lot of people like to think that it was Caunabo. However, we know that Taino society allowed for both partners to have other partners. So we cannot say with certainty that Caunabo was her father. It's also interesting to note that we can't say for certainty if Anacaona had any other children because it's not described in any of the cronistas of any of those who wrote about her. They didn't mention any other children. No males, no other females, only Higuanamota. And her story is interesting because she found herself in the middle of a revolt that she didn't cause. But as we know in history, a lot of times, a lot of the battles was about a woman. And so one of the rebellions on the island was caused by two men who wanted Higuanamota. So we'll start at the first mention of Higuanamota, and it was during Caunabo's capture. Caunabo was captured by Ojeda, seen over here, in 1496. And we know that Anacaona and her daughter Higuanamota were able to escape the capture. But all of Caunabo's other wives and children and treasure was taken by Ojeda. Las Casas tells us that after Caunabo's capture, Anacaona and her daughter went back to Jaragua. We know that by the end of 1496, this is where Higuanamota and her mother were. Jaragua was known as the center of cultural life on the island. All of the cronistas say it was highly advanced compared to the other tribes of the island. So as Higuanamota and her mother became adjusted to returning home, chaos erupted on the island. Francisco Roldan had been the first mayor of La Isabela, but by 1497, he was completely unsatisfied with the Colon's administration and decided to rebel. They were desperate and hungry, so he easily managed to get, as Las Casas notes and says, hasta 70 hombres, los más sanos, gente común y algunos principales que él pudo atraer así, que pretendían lo mismo que él, de los cuales yo conocí los más o casi todos. And it wasn't that Colon wasn't aware of their dissatisfaction. He actually had commanded for a new boat to be built in order to bring those unsatisfied back to Spain. However, Colon had returned to Spain himself before this ship had been constructed. He left in command his brother Diego Colon, and his brother deliberately detained or delayed the construction of this other boat. The isolation that they felt and their feelings of powerlessness against these people was what gave Roldan an upper hand in being successful in his revolt. Roldan promised the following to his followers. He said that he would give them land, servants, and women. He vowed to complain to the king of how Colon and his brothers were treating them. So in 1497, he left La Isabela, walked through the jungle, and ended up in Jaragua. At the time he arrived, it's believed that Becho was still alive at this time. So we can imagine that Higuanamota was off to the side, watching as these Spanish men walked into their village. Roldan was charismatic, and he managed to convince Anacaona and Becho that he was a better leader than the Colon brothers and that they could trust him. He was going to eliminate the tribute system and they would never have to pay anything else. But we know that this was just a front. Roldan was not in favor of the Tainos. He just wanted to take advantage of their generosity. Through the writings, we have a kind of insinuation that Roldan ended up being with Higuanamota. He had some sort of relationship with her at some point, because we know that later on he actually brings this up as a reason as to why he was upset about the situation. So Anacaona and Beecho and Roldan basically made a treaty. They allowed him and his rebels to settle there. They were given land, they were given servants. Hernando Colon, one of Colon's sons, who wrote extensively about what happened in those first years, he wrote the following. He said, one of the most powerful reasons for staying in Jaragua was por ser las mujeres de allí más hermosas y de agradable trato que en otra parte. Y esto era lo que más les incitaba para irse a Jaragua. And Rodan promoted his plan. He told his followers, habían de tener la vida que veían que ellos tenían, la cual no era otra sino andar de pueblo en pueblo de los indios, cada uno con las mujeres que le placía tener y los servientes cuantos querían, fuesen hijas o hijos de los señores y caciques, aunque las besase y haciendo cuanto querían, sin que nadie les fuese a la mano. It was documented that because of their fear of retaliation from the other Spanish settlers, Roldan and his men constantly moved around the region, and they used the indigenous people to carry their stuff. We can just imagine how Higuanamota must have felt to see everything basically taken over by these Spanish settlers. She was the daughter of Anacaona, but she was not the daughter of a cacique. However, she was seen as a pawn. She was a powerful piece to have in this political show. So it is thought that as part of their deal, Higuanamota was given to Roldan.